Hi everyone, good evening. I hope all of you are doing well. And again, I'm guessing those of you who joined, of course, have appeared for the ZAT and you're interested in knowing what would be the cutoffs and uh, percentile versus score prediction. So, of course, we'll be talking about that. And before we get started, just want to share something that this is based on the discussion that I had with all the other mentors who ended up taking the test. Unfortunately, there weren't too many mentors who were able to take the test because we got centers which were really far off, something that ZAT has been doing in a very notorious manner. Even I had a center which was about 200 kilometers from my place, so decided not to appear for the ZAT. So that is why all of this is based on the inputs that we got from the IMS mentors who took the test. Some of them, in fact, traveled even 300 kilometers to take the test, unfortunately. And of course, based on the inputs that students gave, right? So it's a compilation of all of that. So let's begin. And I think by now everybody kind of knows that QADI was the most difficult part this time. So I can see that some of you already written in the chat that QADI was pretty difficult. If you look at the structure, no changes on that front. So that's a good thing that they haven't changed the structure of the test too much. So you had the standard thing, which was similar to last year, that you had part 170 minutes split as BRC, DM, and QADI. And of course, the number of questions also remained the same. You had the flexibility to do whatever you want to do within this 170 minutes that are available to you. And then the part two, which is 10 minutes, which is GK. The good thing there is that you don't have any negative marking. So I'm guessing that most of the students would have attempted all the questions there, at least marked all the questions. Genuine attempts is a separate thing, right? So let's talk about, and it would have been wise to in a paper like this, right, is to spend more time on the VA and the DM section. Because if you had spotted earlier that, okay, Q and DI is difficult part, you could have used that additional time to, let's say, spend on VA, LR, and the DM section so that you would have improved your overall score, right? Of course, also taking care of the fact that there is sectional cutoff for XLRI. So you have to at least do the bare minimum. And we'll talk about the cutoffs as we progress, right? So 170 minutes, 10 minutes, part one, part two, all of that was pretty standard. And then no negative for general knowledge. Of course, that marking scheme is difficult, slightly interesting also, but at the same time for students, it's a lot of concern. But if you have attempted more questions, then obviously you will not get hit by those unattempted question penalty that exists. And anyway, there is no point thinking too much about it, right? So let's talk about the predictions that we have at this point of time, right? And again, as I mentioned, this is based on the initial impression. It's been just 2 hours that the test got over, and it's always difficult to make cutoff predictions, but this is where we feel things would be. So if you look at the XLRI cutoff, so BM male female, the cutoffs are slightly different. And what you see is typically if you are somewhere expecting to get somewhere in the range of QADI at about 7 to 8 marks, right? You should be able to clear the XLRI BM sectional is what we feel at this point of time. Okay, so it's a 7 to 8 marks, and for female candidates that would be about 6 to 7 marks, somewhere in that range. For VALR, that would be around 8 to 9 marks. And for DM, it's going to be somewhere between 9 to 10, but very close to 10. Overall, for male candidates, it would be somewhere around 29 to 30 marks. And for female candidates, it would be around 26 to 27 marks is what we feel at this point of time. For the HRM cutoffs, because they have that segregation between male engineers, female non-engineers, and all of that, there are 4 rows that you see there. What you see as a constant thing in QADI is somewhere around 5 to 6 marks. Only for male engineers, that would be slightly higher, which is about 6 to 7 marks. For the VALR, for female candidates, that would be about 8 to 9 marks as the minimum required, and 10 to 11 for the male candidates. And for DM section, I would say about 7 to 8 if you got as a female candidate. That's a good number to clear the cutoff. Approximately 10 if you're a male candidate. So I would say somewhere in the range of, again, depending on who you are, whether are you a male engineer or a female engineer and so on, the score that you should be looking at is somewhere in the range of 25 to 30. And if you are there somewhere, there is a chance of something like an XLRI HRM program materializing for you. Okay. For female non-engineer, the cutoffs are the least. That would be around 25 marks overall. If you are expecting to get that sort of a score, I think you should be, you can at least hope for a call from XLRI. Now, one important thing is XLRI also releases the answer key. So you would have the response sheet, which means that you will be able to challenge the questions as well. Of course, at IMS, we always make sure that we go through the answer key that is provided. And if there are any questions that are worth challenging, we'll end up challenging those questions. That might happen across the section. So we never know if at all there were any questions with any open interpretations or any issues. We'll of course see that once the answer key is released. Okay, so this is the initial estimate at this point of time. Overall, VLR was very similar to XAT 25, so no major surprises on that front. Even DM was very, very similar. The only change this time that happened was the QADI section became more difficult compared to XAT 25. Now, if you observe in the last couple of years, that has been happening. I mean, if you look at VLR, every year it was found that over the last couple of years, if you look at 23, 24, 25, VLR becoming slightly more accessible as a section. Even QADI compared to, let's say, 2021, 22, etc., became slightly more accessible, but it was gradually increasing a bit in terms of its complexity. So questions never being direct. DM now, what has happened is that DM, the way they have been asking questions, it has become more of a predictable thing. So that is why a lot of people are able to sort of do well on the DM section. So if you look at the past year cutoffs as well, we don't see cutoff from 25 changing too much for the VLR and the DM sections. The differences are going to be very marginal. But for the QADI section, the cutoff will drop a little bit, which will also impact the overall a little bit. Now, why it will not impact a lot is because people who figured that, okay, QADI is difficult, would have invested more time in VLR and the DM section, compensating for that increased difficulty in the QA in the form of more attempts. And that is why the overall would not drop too much. So there is going to be some drop, but that drop will not be very, very significant. Now let's talk about the QADI section. So in QADI, numbers questions, a significant number of questions from numbers area, but a lot of questions from geometry. So numbers and geometry was like the most dominant part of the whole thing. Very few arithmetic questions. So people who were kind of relying on their arithmetic skills would have had a little bit of difficulty handling this particular thing. Again, algebra, only one question, modern math, three questions. So not too many questions from the areas of algebra, arithmetic, and modern math. So people who had these strengths would have found things to be a bit difficult. DI wasn't also straightforward, right? So you had a lot of information, lot to work with in the data interpretation question. So I was talking to the academic head, and he appeared for the test, and he spoke about the difficulty of the sets, right? That it's not very straightforward. So you'll have to do some computations, and you will have to really sit through and handle a particular set, right? It's not going to be that, okay, you looked at it and then you get the answer. So that is why overall it was challenging. We have put, in fact, total number of questions that we have marked as easy, it's just about 6 questions. So out of the 28 questions which were there, I would say only 6 questions can be classified as, okay, easy questions, which means it's a direct question that can be answered using a formula. Medium questions, if you look at it from the QA side, that number is around 7 plus 4 questions of DI if you include. That would be 11 questions. And the rest of the questions were difficult. So the good thing, of course, would have been to attempt all the easy ones if you had identified the easy ones, and do maybe a couple of medium questions to ensure that you clear the QA sectional, and then you maximize in the VRC and the DM section, right? So VLR and the DM section. So you would have maximized there rather than spending too much time on QA. But again, it's always difficult to take these decisions while you're in the test, considering the fact that there is penalty for unattempted questions. So some students would have been that maybe I'm not attempting too many questions in QA, so that fear also would have contributed a little bit to the cutoffs. Now, if you look at the VA and the verbal and the logical ability section, so in this particular section, as I said, nothing surprising compared to last year, right? So people who had, let's say, taken that 25 or at least had done the past year papers, maybe 23, 24, 25, would have found the structure to be pretty similar, right? Except RCs, I would say, which were like medium to difficult. Rest of the things can be classified as medium. So somebody who is well prepared for CAT would have found this section to be pretty similar, pretty straightforward in that sense, because questions were not too complicated. So even things like parajumbles, grammatically correct sentence, all of these were what I discussed with, again, the verbal mentors who took the test, that it was pretty straightforward to attempt, not very, very difficult, correct? So overall, very similar to last year. DM section also was similar. So medium to difficult is how you will put it. But typically that is how we put the DM section in any case. No quantitative DM set. So if somebody had, let's say, allocated about 50-55 minutes, you would have had a pretty good attempt on the DM section. The GK section, nothing much to talk about here because you have the 20 questions. There's no negative marking, so you have to mark everything. Hope people attempted all the questions, at least the genuine attempts. If let's say if you had 10 to 11 serious attempts with about 5-6 questions getting right, I think that's a pretty decent attempt because you never know how things are going to be. But as long as you get like a reasonably good score, you should be fine. Okay. So this is again taking you back to the verdict, and after this, I'll also show you like a slide where we have percentile wise predictions for individual sectional scores and overall. So this is where we feel, because some students may have joined in a bit late. I think this is where things will be. So for BM overall, for males, the cutoff should be somewhere around 29 to 30. And for female, it would be around 26 to 27. This is a drop that we have predicted from compared to last year, purely attributing that to the QADI scores, right? Because VLR DM would remain more or less the same. For HRM, if you're a male engineer, around 29 to 30 marks. If you're a female engineer, around 26, 27. For a male non-engineer, around 28 to 29. And for a female non-engineer, a score of about 25 would be good enough for XLRI. That's what the current estimates are, right? And this is where I think a lot of you would be interested in, as to what would be like the percentile versus score estimates. Initially what happens is that a lot of people come out and say that the paper was difficult, right? But once the actual scores start coming in, and once we have that okay, I attempted so many questions and so on, we realize that the initial reaction sometimes appears to be very harsh about a particular section, and then the scores tell you a slightly different story, right? That is why we haven't dropped it too much compared to last year. Now, what we have done is we have put the VLR and DM estimates to be very similar to what it was last year. QADI, I would say in the 95 plus percentile range. The drop compared to last year would be somewhere around 2 marks. And below that, the drop would be somewhere around 1 mark. Okay, because what happens is, see, the easy questions, if you're able to spot, right, and most students who, let's say, get less than 90 percentile would also be able to spot the easy questions, which means that it's not going to be a major differentiator. So it's not going to drop the score too much. So that is why below 95 percentile, maybe 1 mark drop compared to last year is where things would be. So if let's say you're marked 5, if you're getting a score of 5, right, that should give you somewhere around 70 percentile is what we think. Okay, assuming you would have marked, let's say, taken a few half chances here and there. A score of about 12, right, would be around 98 percentile. I think this is as I said, drop of 2 compared to last year. And a 99.9 should be somewhere around 17.5, because you're still going to have those 0.1% of the population who would be able to get to that particular score out of 20, right? It's because people who, let's say, would have done very well on the quant section of QA, right? They of CAT, they would also come and appear for XAT. So you're still going to have a lot of people there. But as I said, drop of about 2 at the 95 plus percentile range, and drop of about 1 for all the ranges below that. VLR DM, very, very similar to last year, marginal changes of about, say, 0.5 here and there that will happen. And total score estimates, as I mentioned, a 99.9 should be somewhere around 42. A 99 would be around 36 marks. Okay, so 95 would be around 29. And all of these are drops compared to last year. So not very, very significant drops, but drops indeed. Okay. I'm looking at the chat, and some of you have mentioned I went through all the QADI questions. I was only able to solve 11 questions with certainty. That's it, right? So, see, 11 questions, I think, is a pretty good attempt. Okay, if you manage to get pretty much all of them correct, I think you're on your way to at least clear the sectional requirement that is there. So, I don't think you should have any problem clearing the sectional requirement if that happens. VLR was too lengthy for me. I had to skip 2 RCs. Yeah, so that's why we said RCs as medium to difficult, because again, a lot of questions on it, but also the passages were slightly intense to read. So yeah, I mean, that will happen. But see, if you had done the other things which are there in the verbal section, It's still okay. So it's fine that you are not able to attempt all the RC questions. All right. So overall, again, just taking you back to this particular slide, if you are looking at these numbers, I think you should be able to clear the XLRI sectional requirement for the BM and the HRM program. And if you're looking at non-XLRI institutes, I think these are the numbers that you can go with, right? So something like a 36 marks for 99 percentile. Let's wait for the official answer key, post which we will have more clarity, because then once we have the actual question paper, it becomes easier to classify the questions also and come up with slightly better estimates, do like a comparison compared to last year's paper and all of that. Right now, though the students will come out and mentors have also taken the test, you don't remember all the questions, right? So it's always difficult to do a good comparison in that sense. That is why these are initial estimates. You can work with this a little bit, but within a few days. So generally, if you look at XAT, they release the answer key very, very quickly. So you don't have to wait, I think, maybe a week's time maximum, wherein you will have the answer key release, post which things will become more clear. Okay. For now, these are the initial estimates. You can have a look at this. And that's it from my side. I hope the session has helped you. As I mentioned in the beginning, I could not take the test, unfortunately. So had to just talk to all the other mentors who took the test. Unfortunately, had a center which was like 200 kilometers and definitely was not in the mood to travel. So sorry for that. Otherwise, I would have, I think, taken the test and spoken from the center directly, maybe like a first cut analysis. But this is what it is. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining and wish all of you all the best. If you did well, great. But if you haven't, please remember that there are other tests as well that are still remaining. You have CMAT, which is happening on 25th Jan. You have the MyCAT 2 that will happen. You're also going to have the Maharashtra MBA CET. So NM, again, NMAT, the additional window is open now. So don't lose sight of all of those things while you are thinking, okay, how much you're going to score on the ZAT. So that's it from my side. Thank you so much for joining. I wish all of you all the best. Let's wait for the official answer key, post which, in case we need to change this, we will change and share an update with all of you. And if there are any questions that are worth challenging, IMS will challenge. So just let us know if you think we should be challenging any of the questions. Okay. So thanks everyone for joining, and I'll see you soon. Okay. Bye. Take care.